Hi, folks. Welcome back to Inside Analysis. Yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh, here again at the TDWI in Orlando. And I'm with Zach Adda now from a company called Exasol, a database company. They've been around for a while. I've been tracking them about 15 years. And you guys are still kicking butt and taking names over there. So tell us, first of all, what are you focused on these days? What's the sweet spot for Exasol now?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So thanks a lot, Eric. Excited to be here. I mean, to take a step back at, what we are at our core is we're a high performance analytics database.
All right.
And so high performance analytical queries. So your joins, calculations, aggregations, joining lots of tables. We do that very, very fast, and
Mm-hmm.
especially at scale.
Mm-hmm.
The way that we're able to do that is because we're an in-memory database,
Okay.
massively parallel processing. And so a lot of our traditional use cases that we solve for is like an enterprise data warehouse. So
Mm-hmm.
we do have all the enterprise data warehousing features that you'd expect.
Hmm.
Um, but a lot of customers also start off because we're so high performance with BI acceleration.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a Tableau, they have a Power BI, they're getting a spinning wheel of death, and they really want to have those performant dashboards for
Right.
better experience, and they want to have a finer grain of data.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can load that data into their Exasol database, do a live connection or direct query to Exasol. And since we're so good at the query execution, it creates a really good user experience for the ad hoc analysis or just faster, complex dashboard loads.
Hmm. Well, the joins are the hard parts, right? I
Hmm.
mean, isn't that where a lot of the tax is? And it sounds like you've got an excellent query optimizer
Hmm.
that knows in what sequence to do things and
Hmm.
how to do things,
Hmm.
right? Because if you don't have a good optimizer, then a simple query could take a long time.
Hmm.
And what you've kind of figured out under the hood is how to optimize the process of getting that query done. Is
Yes.
that about right?
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, I mean, because we do have a cost-based optimizer,
Okay.
and so we are doing, statistics and looking at the query run plans from previous runs to optimize that query run plan on the fly. Um, but also it's in-memory operations since
Okay.
we are an in-memory
Yeah, right.
database.
Right.
And so yeah, it's the combination of those types of things. A lot of people ask us because a lot of customers don't believe it when I show them benchmarks and
Right.
performance numbers. They're like, ah, it's too good to be true. Once we get them and their data in an Exasol database, the proof is in the pudding,
Hmm.
and they see it for themselves. Um, and I think that's really the power of Exasol. Yeah.
Well, and so you bring up an interesting point. I remember when Hasso Plattner of SAP ran the numbers, this has got to be 20 years ago now, if not a bit more, and realized there's going to be a time in the future when solid is as affordable as spinning disk,
Mm,
right? And so that's why they built S4HANA to be in memory.
hmm.
And it sounds like some smart people at Exasol figured that out a while ago too,
Uh-huh.
because to your point, in memory is lightning fast
Yeah,
compared to spinning disk.
sure.
And so you guys got a head start on being able to leverage in memory
Hmm.
as an architecture, because to your point, that allows you to go and just zip through these processes. And
Yeah,
that's what people want.
yeah.
If like, especially once a user gets acclimated to speed, they don't ever want to go back,
Yep. Yep.
right? Like no one ever says, no, I'm okay with it being slow. No one ever says that,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
So
Yes.
that's why you have to get it in their hands, get them using it. They're like, oh my goodness, it's real,
Yep, yep.
right?
No, absolutely. Um, and I do think that because if you look at the history of Exasol, because we were born as a university research project in
Okay.
Nuremberg, Germany in the late 90s.
All right.
Um, the story, as I understand, is the team was trying to do some weather pattern analysis, and they were
Okay.
using an Oracle database, and it just wasn't fast enough.
Right.
And so they developed this, Oracle accelerator to help with this particular weather pattern analysis,
Interesting.
and that was a success. And so then in 2000, um, they realized at the end of this project, which was a success, okay, this can actually be its own standalone database.
Hmm.
And so that's how Exasol was actually born.
Wow.
And it wasn't written from the kernel of any other existing database, built completely from scratch, and in German engineering. And when those customers say, how do you get this performance once they actually see the proof in the pudding, they ask me kind of, what's the secret sauce?
Right.
And we don't have alien technology, believe it or not. I like to use an analogy where, if you gave Gordon Ramsay the same ingredients as myself, I
Hmm.
guarantee you Gordon Ramsay is going to make
Right.
a more delicious meal
Right.
than me. And that's what our engineering team has done.
Interesting.
And I do think that we, made a gamble in the early 2000s to go with in memory when it was a little bit more expensive back then
Right.
to do that in memory processing optimization.
Right.
So we've been, we cracked a code many years ago and have been refining that ever since. And still to this day, we're able to have this immense competitive advantage
Mm-hmm.
with query execution.
Right. Well, and that's the key is like I mentioned it a minute ago, but the speed of response really dictates in many ways the value of the query.
Hmm.
Because if you don't get it back fast enough, we talked for years about having queries that go at the speed of thought. If
Hmm.
if the system lags behind, you lose the mental thread in
Oh
your
yeah.
head and you just go on to something else. And there is I would say, a huge opportunity cost for not investing in this kind of technology
Hmm.
because once you have it, like the questions just start to pop. Wait, I can ask that now?
Right.
Hold on a second. I want to check this out. I want to check that out. It's
Right.
the kind of thing where once they see that they can get that speed,
Hmm.
they want to do it more and more. And
Yep.
that's what you want from your analyst,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Absolutely.
Like
No, absolutely.
you
Absolutely.
want them fully engaged. And if you grease those tracks,
Hmm.
they're going to be checking out ideas. They're going to be hypothesizing. Because, well, I
Hmm.
read something on LinkedIn the other day that someone did some research that said something like 78% of ideas fail in the
Okay.
business, right? Which
Sure.
sounds bad,
Yeah.
but it's not that bad. It's like it's
Yeah.
an 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
The point is to fail fast forward, as they say,
Yes.
and that requires experimentation, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. That's actually one of my favorite customer quotes. Mark Jackson, he's the chief data officer at Piedmont Healthcare. Um, they've been a long-term Exasol customer and have built their enterprise data warehouse using Exasol.
All right.
So a lot of their data comes from Epic
Oh,
electronic
geez.
healthcare record,
Yeah, right.
and then they're serving up hundreds of Tableau dashboards. And he actually did a really good post on LinkedIn talking about the data velocity that they have processing through trillions of records essentially through Exasol every single day.
Wow.
Um, but he said Exasol allows us to fail fast.
Wow.
Um, one really good example he gave was during COVID. Obviously, with them being a hospital, the way that they're operating over changed overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how they were, figuring out capacity, bed planning, just all the ways that they operated changed completely. And they were able to get 30 new Tableau dashboards into production in less than a month because they were able to iterate quickly, like
Wow.
you're talking about.
Right.
And you know, that's very impressive.
Yeah.
Very impressive. And especially when the stakes are high
Right.
in like a hospital type
Yeah,
environment.
right, right. Well, the speed of action, and again, once the door is open, people walk through it.
Hmm.
If the door is closed in their minds, they just do other things. They don't
Yeah.
think about it. And so,
Yeah.
and it's hard to even calculate the magnitude of that opportunity cost until you open the door and see the behavior. You're like, oh my goodness, why didn't we do this a while ago?
Hmm. Yeah.
Because it's especially these days when you look at the amount of pressure from AI, the
Hmm.
amount of pressure from competition, the amount of regulations you have to deal with, all these things that factor in and are constraints
Hmm.
to the idea process, ideation, basically.
Hmm.
If you can grease the tracks on the ideation, you help the entire business cycle, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And those are the customers that we do very well with, or I like to call them the technical innovators,
Mm-hmm.
the ones that don't, when they see the performance, say, "Oh, well, our current solution is fast enough."
Right.
It's like, what? Fast enough, but you can go so much faster,
Right.
and there is missed opportunity.
Right.
Um, and we can give you access to more opportunity, more queries, more development, more innovation.
Right.
And I think you mentioned it earlier, but adoption as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because people spend all this time creating their data products, but what good are these beautiful, great data products if they're slow and nobody wants to use them?
Right.
You want to have your end users having that enjoyable experience. So they're, yes, having this kind of, action, or what'd you say?
Conversation with the data.
Conversation with the data.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you made me think of something else here too, which is really important because end users, you never know where someone is in their journey, right? There
Hmm.
are some very sophisticated end users who understand analytic databases and LLMs and all this stuff.
Yep.
Most people don't.
Yeah.
And so I think there is a bit of a lure now to, oh, well, let's just use ChatGPT for this or for that.
Hmm.
But you have to understand, it's good at certain things.
Sure.
It's very good at text generation. It's very
Hmm.
good at sounding compelling,
Hmm.
but it's not an analytical database
Sure.
and it cannot handle the scale of information that you're talking about.
Hmm.
So What you really want is this so-called hybrid query
Hmm.
where you're leveraging the power of an LLM for ideas and for context,
Hmm.
but the actual number crunching is
Hmm.
done in the analytic database.
Yep.
And that's what you enable. And unless you have that kind of a power, you cannot crunch numbers like that.
Yep.
You simply will not be able to do it. And for larger organizations or companies with lots and lots of data, of structured data, either
Hmm.
financial or temporal or whatever it is,
Hmm.
the power of an analytic database is deeply game changing, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And we already have some customers adopting, we have an Exasol semantic layer.
Mm-hmm.
And so what this allows you to do is create this semantic layer in the database. And so you can have like a star schema behind the scenes. And then through the semantic layer, it's actually leverages our virtual schema technology.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like a federated query to Exasol itself, but it allows you to define what those metrics and calculations are, business friendly terms,
Hmm.
and it sits in front of that star schema. And what we found is that it allows you to write very simple SQL. So you don't have to do joins anymore. You don't have to do group bys.
How interesting.
And so now what you can do is actually much more, um, what would you say, accurate natural language querying.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you just pass the metadata of your semantic layer and maybe some context about the data, like that, certain value ranges, things like this. But you just pass the metadata and those value ranges to your LLM
Hmm.
along with the question that's being asked. And now the LLM doesn't have to do this complex SQL generation of, what do you mean by revenue?
How
How
interesting.
do I join these tables? All that's contained in the semantic layer. All it has to do is generate very simple SQL.
Hmm.
And now you get a much more consistent and accurate experience actually
Hmm.
querying your structured data in an analytics database.
That's very clever. You've added a layer of abstraction
Hmm.
that captures the semantics and thus allows for an optimized workflow between the engine and the LLM,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
So this is very now. Do you call it an MCP or
We also have an MCP server
okay? All right.
released just a few months ago.
Okay.
And so that is another way to interface with the database.
I
And
see.
I know the team right now is working with how do we combine MCP with the semantic layer to,
Right.
really create, a fully rounded solution.
Right.
But yeah.
That's very, very cool because if you get an elegant architecture like that, to your point, you wind up saving all kinds of time
Hmm.
and the engine will give you a much simpler answer, right?
Yeah.
Occam's razor, you
Hmm.
want the simplest answer to get
Yeah.
things done.
Yeah.
Because one of the dangers of using AI is that it can come up with some very complex stuff
Yeah.
that you didn't need,
Yes.
right? And so
Yes.
you got to be careful about that. But if you understand and you have this architecture that allows you to, again, get the structured data from your database, for example, from the data warehouse,
Hmm.
layered with the semantics into the LLM, that's when you get the best of both worlds,
Yep.
right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you guys are based in Germany, but you have offices in the US and other places too, or?
Yeah, that's correct. So we recently opened up a developer hub in India in
No.
Chennai.
All right.
I'm 95% sure I got the right city there. Yeah. And then yeah, we're US based and then we have a UK office and then Nuremberg, Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's your sweet spot right now? Because we're in this strange era. I'm old enough to remember, when Teradata was the king of the hill,
Hmm.
and they're still around, they're still doing things, but then Hadoop came along and it
Yeah.
was kind of like a little left turn for a while. And
Hmm.
then what happened? Snowflake and Databricks and all these other
Yeah.
guys. So where do you kind of fit into that sort of pantheon of players?
Sure, sure, sure. So like I said, I mean, we can solve these different use cases from being your full enterprise data warehouse all the way to acceleration for your BI type tools. If I were to kind of distill where our sweet spot is when you have a growing scale of data and high concurrency.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's when if you stack us up against
I see.
competitors, competitors for Exasol are going to be your Snowflakes, your Teradatas, your Oracles, Databricks Photon, for example, or any of the hyperscalers, analytic solutions like Redshift,
Mm-hmm.
Synapse, BigQuery. But because ultimately we're driving down total cost of ownership
Mm-hmm.
because a 10-second query in Exasol is going to require less resources than a 10-second query in any of those competitive solutions.
Right.
And the cost to do the cost benefit you see with Exasol and its performance only grows as the data volume grows and the amount of queries that are hitting the system
I see.
grows. So I think that's really our sweet spot are those higher scale, higher concurrency type workloads,
Right.
where we just really shine.
Yeah. Well, that's important stuff, especially for mid to large size enterprises,
Hmm.
where again, they have a lot of analysts,
Hmm.
and it's like those analysts are not much. So
Yeah.
you want to give them all the energy they need to go ask their questions, run their queries, make their decisions, feed it back into the business, and start over again, right?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Well, folks, look this gentleman up online, Zach Adda, Adda from Exasol. It's Exasol. Very cool stuff here at TDWI in Orlando. And if you want to be on the show, send me an email, info@dmradio.biz. That comes right to me. And we'll talk to you later. We'll be right back, actually. You're listening to Inside Analysis.